From scorn and laughter he had wavered to an uneasy wonder, and from wonder his mind had passed to the conviction that there were powers occult and terrible which strove in darkness and prevailed, secrets and spells that could send disease on man and beast, dark incantations known to few which could maim and cripple. And of these few his wife was one. His reason revolted, but some conviction deeper than reason held its own. To such a view it seemed that the deed he contemplated was no crime, but rather an act of obedience to the ordinance, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." And the sense of detachment was over that, even as over the memories that oozed up in his mind. Somebody, not he, who had planned everything very carefully, was in the next hour going to put an end to his bondage. So the years had passed, he floundering ever deeper in the slough into which he was plunged, out of which while she lived he could never emerge. For the last year she, wearying of his personal presence at the farm, had allowed him to take a lodging in the village. She did not loose her hold over him, for the days were few on which she did not come with demands for a handful of shillings to procure her the raw spirits which alone could slake her thirst. Sometimes as he sat at work there in the north room looking on to the small garden yard, she would come lurching up the path, with her bloated crimson face set on the withered neck, and tap at his window with fingers shrivelled like birds' claws. Body and limbs were no more than bones over which the wrinkled skin was stretched, but her face bulged monstrously with layers of fat. He would give her whatever he had about him, and if it was not enough she would plant herself there, grinning at him and wheedling him, or with screams and curses threatening him with such fate as he had known to overtake those who had crossed her will. But usually he gave her enough to satisfy her for that day and perhaps the next, for thus she would the more quickly drink herself to death. Yet death seemed long in coming. He remembered well how first the notion of killing her came into his head. Just a little seed, small as that of mustard, which lay long in barrenness. Only the bare idea of it was there, like an abstract proposition. Then, imperceptibly in the fruitful darkness of his mind, it must have begun to sprout, for presently a tendril, still soft and white, prodded out into the daylight. He almost pushed it back again, for fear that she, by some divining art, should probe his purpose. But when next she came for supplies, he saw no gleam of surmise in her red-rimmed eyes, and she took her money and went her way, and his purpose put forth another leaf, and the stem of it grew sappy. All autumn through it had flourished and grown tree-like, and fresh ideas, fresh details, fresh precautions flocked there, like building birds, and made it gay with singing. He sat under the shadow of it and listened with brightening hopes to their song. Never had there been such peerless melody. They knew their tunes now. There was no need for any further rehearsal. He began to wonder how soon he would be back on the road again, with face turned from this buffeting wind, and on his way home. His business would not take him long. The central deed of it would be over in a couple of minutes, and he did not anticipate delay about the setting to work on it, for by 7 o'clock of the evening, as he well knew, she was usually snoring in the oblivion of complete drunkenness. And even if she was not as far gone as that, she would certainly be incapable of any serious resistance. After that, a quarter of an hour more would finish the job, and he would leave the house secure already from any chance of detection. Night after night during these last 10 days he had been up here, peering from the darkness into the lighted room where she sat, then listening for her step on the stairs as she stumbled up to bed, or hearing her snorings as she slept in her chair below. The outhouse, he knew, was well stocked with paraffin. He needed no further apparatus than the whipcord and the matches he carried with him. Then back he would go along the exact route by which he had come, re-entering the village again from the eastwards, in which direction he had set out. This walk of his was now a known and established habit. Half the village during the last week or two had seen him every evening set forth along the coast road for a tramp in the dusk when the light failed for his painting, and had seen him come back again as they hung about and smoked in the warm dusk a couple of hours later. None knew of his detour to the main road, which took him westwards again above the village, and so to the stretch of bleak upland along which now he fought his way against the gale. Always around about the hour of 8 he had entered the village again from the other side, and had stopped and chatted with the loiterers. Tonight, no later than was usual, he would come up the cobble road again, and give good night to anyone who lingered there outside the public house. In this wild wind it was not likely that there would be such, and if so, no matter. He had been seen already setting forth on his usual walk by the coast of the bay, and if none outside saw him return, none could see the true chart of his walk. By 8 he should be back to his supper. There would be soused herring for him and a cut of cheese, and the kettle would be singing on the hob for his hot whisky toddy. He would have a keen edge for the enjoyment of them tonight. He would drink long healths to the damned and the dead. Not till tomorrow, probably, would the news of what had happened reach him, for the farmhouse lay lonely and sheltered by the wood of firs. However high might mount the beacon of its blazing, it would scarcely, screened by the tall trees, light up the western sky and be seen from the village nestling below the steep hill crest. By now John Aylesford had come to the fir-wood which bordered the road on the left, and, as he passed into its shelter, cut off from the violence of the gale. All its branches were astir with the sound of some vexed overhead sea, and the trunks that upheld them creaked and groaned in the fury of the tempest. Somewhere behind the thick scud of flying cloud the moon must have risen, for the road glimmered more visibly, and the tossing blackness of the branches was clear enough against the grey tumult overhead. Behind the tempest she rode in serene skies, and in the murderous clarity of his mind he likened himself to her.